This episode is brought to you by Honda. When you test drive the all-new Prologue EV, there's a lot that can impress you about it. There's the class-leading passenger space, the clean, thoughtful design, and the intuitive technology. But out of everything, what you'll really love most is that it's a Honda. Visit honda.com/EV to see offers.
Hello, wonderful listeners. I am your host, Elizabeth Emery, a former professional athlete. Every other week, through long-form interviews, I bring you stories from incredible female athletes and other women in sport. Hear Her Sports is still on break, but I have lined up some great bonus episodes while we are away. In the last bonus episode, Mario Salazar and Angela Morales of the Angel City Soccer podcast, Casual FC, join me to talk about a bunch of cool women's soccer things and about how unbelievably fantastic it is to have a pro women's team in your city. And this week, I'm talking to pole vaulter superstar Katie Moon. The episode came about because I went to the Katie Moon Pole Vault Classic at Olmsted Falls High School. It's very close to where I live and is where Katie started her illustrious pole vaulting career. The event was a summer highlight for me. I met some great people like Gabby Leon, who was recently on the podcast. I saw pole vaulting live, which I had never done before, and I had the opportunity to attend the press conference. There, Katie made an offhand comment that she was gluten-free. Wow, I had to know more because I went gluten-free in late March of this year, so it's been about 6 months. How and why did Katie decide to become gluten-free? How is she making it work as a pro athlete? What did it feel like for her to eat gluten versus not? Katie has been on Hear Her Sports before, way back in episode 14, in fact, as well as during COVID. She has always been such a joy to work with, so professional, so wonderful, and even though in episode 14, she was not yet a 2-time world champion or a Tokyo Olympics gold medalist and a Paris Olympics silver medalist, Katie was a big deal. So I am ever grateful that she agreed to be on the podcast when it was just getting going. After the Katie Moon Classic and just a few weeks before the Olympic trials, Katie once again agreed to join me, this time to talk all things gluten-free. Enjoy the show, be prepared to take notes on tips, or you can go to the show notes page at hearhersports.com for links to the gluten-free foods and restaurant app she likes. Well, onward, let us say hello to Team USA pole vaulter Katie Moon. Well, hello, Katie. I am so excited. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk about going gluten-free.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're always so generous with your stories and with your time. I'm absolutely honored that you're here. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot coming up this summer, but really I want to focus this discussion on your story about becoming gluten-free. And it was pretty recently, if I'm correct, like in last fall or something, right?
Yes. So It started, I want to say fall of 2022. So I've had a full year, probably a year and a half of being fully gluten-free. I was diagnosed celiac, which basically just means I am gluten intolerant. I can't process it. I can't absorb nutrients the way that I need to when I eat it because it's breaking down my intestines. And so, yeah, it really wasn't a choice. Unfortunately, my brother is celiac, I should say. My grandpa's celiac. So I had,
Oh, really? Huh.
yeah, so unfortunately, I have an idea of where it came from.
Right.
It wasn't a total shock to the system, and I at least had a crash course watching them and their diets and the changes that my brother made. And it was frustrating though, because I didn't feel sick. I went in for something relatively unrelated, and then I told them my brother is celiac, and they're like, "Oh, let's just test you for it while you're here."
No
And they said,
kidding.
"Do we have to?" Because I love gluten. I love pastas and breads and all things carbs. And sure enough, yeah, I am celiac. So I never thought, I didn't think that I felt bad, but having taken gluten out of my diet, I feel so much better in a way that I didn't even realize how much better I could feel. So I'm very grateful for it, but it's just pretty crazy getting the diet that's right for you, how important that is to how good you feel.
Yeah. So describe maybe, I mean, like looking back, what did you feel when you were eating gluten?
It was a lot of funny enough, it was more mental things. So they say that your gut health is directly related to your
Yes.
mental health. And I was just constantly anxious, and the amount of stress that I held on to, and especially around vaulting, I was always so nervous about vaulting. And that was one of the things I liked about it, was that I felt like I was kind of conquering this battle every time I would practice or compete. And when it went well, it was just the best thing ever, and when it went poorly, it was the worst thing ever. And I just feel like the biggest difference, obviously things like energy, and I feel like my body physically looks better, I guess. Aesthetically, I'm just a bit more lean. But really it's just the mental aspect. I feel like my anxiety levels have dropped significantly. The way that I feel about vaulting now is much more even keeled, and obviously I still care and I'm very y- invested in it, but it's not as negative of a stress as it used to be, which is really cool.
So why do you attribute that to going gluten free? Like, I mean, we all have sort of intuitive sense of what we're doing and what the results are. I'm curious why you would, yeah, why you're
Yeah,
attributing the two to go together.
it's more of just a gut feeling, and again, just hearing my sister's a dietitian, and just talking with her, hearing other dietitians talk about it. Again, the fact that there is your gut health and your mental health are so interconnected. And granted, there are other things that could absolutely, contribute to my stress levels dropping. Just everything that I've achieved, I'm sure, is helping quite a bit. Um, just in the sense that it's easier to be calm about it when I've accomplished these pretty cool things. But yeah, it could be a total fluke, but I am very much in the camp of I don't think anything's a coincidence, and I really did notice a difference just in my day-to-day stress levels. Yeah, so I would say that's probably why.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. So, just full disclosure, I went gluten free in
Ah,
late March.
okay.
And the first thing I noticed was and it's like, this is sort of a weird description, but it felt like my brain was airier. Like there was
Yeah,
more air for thoughts. I don't know.
yeah, no, that's a really good, like, you're not foggy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Curious. So, did you have any gut issues or anything like that?
I didn't think that I did, but hindsight's 2020, and I will not get descriptive on here, but just bowel movements are a lot better now. Again, it wasn't anything crazy. Again, I watched my brother, and he was definitely sick, and just even in like his coloring in his skin. But again, like you just the gut issues that he had, I didn't think they were that bad, but now again, having taken gluten out of my diet, it's much better. So, I what I notice now is if I eat gluten and I shouldn't, because they called it silent celiac, I don't quite get sick the way that some people do, but I just notice that I feel really full for a lot longer, and as the night goes on, I will continue to feel really full. Sometimes the next day, I will be running to the bathroom, not always, like, it's not a tried and true exact science for me, because there are still some things where I'm like, "I know I didn't have gluten, but my gut is a bit more sensitive now, I think, having taken it out just because it knows what's right and wrong." Um, so yeah, I've definitely had some things, but not in the way that people that are really severely celiac experience it. So
Right. There's such a
pretty grateful
range.
for that because of what I do. I mean, gosh, it could be really bad if I with it when I travel and I'm on the road and I don't have if I'm in Europe and let's say they just don't have the options. I thankfully haven't had too much of an issue with that, but God forbid if that were to happen, I'm not as in dire of a situation as some other people might be. So
Right. When you got the test results, like, what did you do? What next? How did you prepare?
Well, it was funny because I was going on my bachelorette trip, so I said, "I'm not dealing with this until next week." So, my bachelorette trip was kinda like my last hurrah with gluten. Um, but yeah, my like I said, my sister's a dietitian, and because my brother was celiac, she had given him her whole spiel from college. She pulled up her old PowerPoint notes, and so I sat down with her, and she sent them to me, and just immediately started making changes. I cleared out my kitchen just to make it easier. I got whole new pots, pans, silverware, plates, and it just from what I've been told is that gluten can leave a residue that's really difficult to get off,
Oh,
if not
wow. I didn't know
impossible to
that.
get off. So the cross contamination can also be really, really bad for some people. Even if I'm not getting immediately sick, cross contamination can still do damage to my body and cause problems in the long run. So I just said, you know what? I want my home to be my safe space. So I'm just going to start over, and then just threw out all the old stuff and looked up recipes. Thankfully, there's still so many good things that you can have. It's just all the rice products, potato products, corn tortillas. So I can still, and I'm sure you've experienced this, you can still have pretty much all your favorite foods that you want, just tweak it in different ways. I definitely feel like the breads haven't quite come as far as I would like them, but at the same time, I said breads earlier, but I'm really more of a pasta girl than anything, and rice anyways. So for me, cutting out breads, I was eating more rice and eggs than I was sandwiches, for example. So cutting out the breads wasn't as difficult. And I think a lot of the pastas now are amazing.
Yeah, they're good.
Yeah, so thankfully, it wasn't as horrible of a transition, but my biggest problem is I love to go out to eat. So it's just being very diligent about looking up where to go, what's going to have options. I have this app called Find Me Gluten Free, and it's basically a Yelp but specifically for gluten. And it's nice because when we go to an area, I can just get on there and see what's around and what I can have and what I probably should avoid, and yeah.
No, that's cool. That's good. I'm gonna use that for sure.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good app.
Yeah,
It's still coming along, and it's fun because I've contributed as well. I've gone out to eat, and that restaurant maybe wasn't on there originally, but I had such a good experience that I put it on there. So if a restaurant's not on there, it doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that someone hasn't reviewed it yet,
right.
and I think it's still growing.
Where I'm having some more issues is, like quick snacks. Because,
Yes,
before I would, have a piece of toast or crackers or whatever, and I'm
right.
finding that more difficult.
Yeah. That has been interesting. My agent's also gluten-free, and she's been so great about just sending me things, so she'll find me gluten-free granola, and I love gluten-free pretzels. I was eating those long before I was ever gluten-free.
The
I just
Glutino ones? Yes,
Yes,
those are
yeah.
good. Yeah,
There's a few different brands, but the glutinos are my favorite.
yeah, me too.
And like I said, I like them better than regular pretzels anyways. So, um, I I feel like I don't snack a ton because I just try to get several meals in a day, but the meals will be like eggs and rice or yogurt, and I love cereal, so I'll do a lot of cereal. Um, I really like beef jerky. For me, it's about getting good proteins in, and so like chomps, the jerkies, those are really good. Love corn, I think is what it's called.
Mm.
Um, they're just these little corn kernels that are super crispy and salty, and they're really, really good. Um, but actually they're still I like potato chips. You can eat a lot of potato chips or Lay's. Lay's are certified gluten-free. Doritos are gluten-free. Like, so there's still quite a bit. Obviously, Doritos are not exactly gonna be top tier
Yeah.
healthy snacks, but when I get home from a workout and I am craving something salty, I will just grab a handful of kettle potato chips, and I just love them. So
Sounds
we're
good.
still working on the
Yeah.
healthy snacks, but
Yeah, you mentioned travel. What are you doing when you travel? I mean, obviously you're using this app, but I would find that very stressful. Like I'm
yeah,
going
it's
for a competition and I'm having to worry about this too.
right. It's usually, thankfully, most of the comps that I'm going to have meals for us, like a buffet, and we let them know ahead of time there have to be gluten-free options, please, because I'm not the only athlete that
Sure.
is
No, yeah.
gluten-free, thankfully, unfortunately. Misery loves company, I guess.
Yeah.
But, and I hate being demanding like that. I was the least pickiest eater. I loved any and all foods. Anywhere we went, I would find something I loved. So I hate it from a sense of being a burden, but at the same time, I know I don't have a choice. So when I travel, it's more of just bringing those snacks that I just talked about. Tuna packets are pretty good because I'll just find some gluten-free crackers that I like and bring tuna packets. And in worst case scenario, I will just like dip the cracker in the tuna packet and eat that. There were these tuna rice cups that did not have to be microwaved. They didn't have to be heated up. And I actually took those to Europe because there was one competition where I was just going to stay on US time. So I actually only got one meal in the dining room because I was waking up at 4 or 5 p.m. and then, up until, gosh, 4 in the morning,
Oh,
5,
wow.
6 in the
Oh,
morning.
yeah.
So I was just eating in my room and really had no options. So I was doing those, yeah, granola, the, uh, the jerky options. So there are options. It's just a matter of taking the time to find them, but thankfully grocery stores tend to section that off for you.
So you mentioned being a burden, and I find that annoying,
Yeah.
when I have to go to somebody's house and like I'm that person. I hate that.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
how are, like your friends and family reacting to this and how are they dealing with it? Because, they're such an important part of your life.
Yeah, they've been amazing. My poor husband, he's like, "I didn't sign up for this." When I proposed, you were fully gluten.
Right.
No, but he's so great because 'cause he'll come home and be like, "Oh, I saw these gluten-free snacks and I bought them for you." And, like, it's just my mom already had a crash course with my brother, and my grandpa on my dad's side, has had it. So thankfully, most of my extended family was very familiar with it. It wasn't they didn't push back in a, oh well, it can't be that bad type of way, which is really nice because there's nothing worse than, people not believing you
Right.
or just, oh, we'll just eat at home all the time. Well, that's not possible. Especially with what I do. It's just lit also I can't imagine a fate worse than having to eat every meal cooked at home for
Right.
the rest of my life. Um, but what's nice is also there are so many restaurants now, like Chipotle, I can't have the tortilla, but everything else is good.
Mhm.
And if I ask them to change their gloves, that that's pretty great for me. I haven't had too much of an issue when that happens. And just there are more places popping up around, so usually you can find options at most places you go to that aren't just like a salad with no dressing and
Right. I can't imagine being gluten-free for your grandpa.
yes, I just so feel for him back then. And my grandma was actually a dietitian, so at least like she knew how serious it was and
Yeah.
she could cater to him and cook, but the options were terrible back then.
Yeah, exactly. Uh, to end things, just can you maybe describe again or in a different way, like how much better you feel and how eating gluten free has impacted your competing and your training and that type of stuff.
Yeah, I feel like I have so much more energy throughout the day. I feel much more clear-headed, like you were saying, and I think that also goes with my anxiety, because when I'm anxious, it's hard for me to focus. I get very overwhelmed with the emotions, and so it's just there's just been a lot more clarity. and a lot more calm, and just I'm not on this roller coaster of the highs are super awesome and the lows are just the end of the world. And it's much more even keeled. And part of that, again, could just be growing up and accomplishing what I have. It's easier to be laid back about things when I've been able to accomplish some really cool things. But I also don't think that's a coincidence either.
Right. Well, thank you so much. I am wishing you tons of luck and success next week. That's going to be awesome. I can't wait to watch.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh man, I always love talking to Katie Moon. This time I learned some really good practical tips for my own new gluten-free life, like eating potato chips and Doritos. I'm also using Find Me gluten-free restaurant app, which I really like. If you didn't take notes and want links to those things that Katie mentioned in our conversation, they are all in the show notes at hearhersports.com. Also on our website, find the Hear Her Sports Spotify playlists in a drop-down tab in the main menu. Our break is a great time to catch up on episodes you missed, even though I keep feeding you wonderful new episodes. I am grateful you are here listening to Hear Her Sports. I love talking about women's sports and am always honored when athletes like Katie Moon take time to share their stories. But you listeners are the ones that matter, that make it worth the work to produce these shows. Not just for me, but for the guests I speak to. Thank you all for being here. Support the podcast by telling your friends about the show and the women you hear from on each episode. If you can, make a donation. We can always use your financial support for production costs. Even small donations make a difference, so go to the donate tab at hearhersports.com to give directly, or we also use Buy Me a Coffee and Patreon, which you can find in the support tab. Hear Her Sports is a member of Evergreen Podcasts. I appreciate them and you. It's an absolute pleasure to be part of this community of women's sports fans. Come back in 2 weeks for another great bonus episode. Bye-bye.
Sports stars. They're like superheroes.
But they're actually real.
Which is why we've made a podcast about them. You see,
They've all got a story.
but too many of these stories were cut short.
Kobe Bryant,
Payne Stewart,
Flojo,
Phil Hughes.
Justin Fashanu,
We're writing episodes about all of them.
and sadly many more.
Death of a Sports Star, a new series from Crowd Network.